We're all set.
Thanks. Hey, welcome to today's AIM Center webinar, Features in Accessibility, Microsoft's Tools in Practice. I'm Cynthia Curry. I'm Director of the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials, and it's my pleasure to be here to moderate today's discussion. I know many of you have gotten accustomed to Luis being the presenter, so I appreciate him actually being here as well in the chat. So if you were looking forward to seeing Luis today, you can catch him in the chat. Luis did a stretch of webinars for the AIM Center over the past couple of months, and we thank him for that. And he's here to facilitate the chat for us. Today's webinar is being closed captioned. You can turn on captions if they're not already automatically by selecting the closed caption button in Zoom, and those captions should appear along the bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear from you. As is typical for webinars, we have muted everybody's audio, but we do want to make sure that we capture your questions, your thoughts, both for our panelists as well as for other attendees who are here. So we have two different ways for you to do that. One is through the chat. The chat is a place for you to share your thoughts, experiences, and ideas with everyone. And then the Q&A is open. The Q&A box is a place for you to post your questions specifically for the panelists. And the idea here is to make it easy for myself as the moderator to catch what are your questions without having to scroll through the chat, and also really reserves a place for all of you as attendees to share and exchange ideas in a separate place. So use the chat to talk amongst yourselves, share ideas. If you have a specific question for one of our panelists, please drop that in the Q&A and I'll make sure that it gets answered. And if it doesn't, we'll make sure that we follow up later if we happen to run out of time. Today's webinar is being recorded, and there are additional materials. So today's slide deck, as well as a digital handout, are both available on the AIM events page for today's webinar. And it's also the place where the recording will be posted in about a week once it goes out to be closed captioned. The link to that, if you're listening, if you're in a listening mode and don't see the URL on the screen, it's bit.ly/3 lowercase f, capital O, lowercase w, s, k, k. And Leslie will also drop that link in the chat for us. Thanks, Leslie. A little bit about the AIM Center before we get started. If you are new to one of our webinars, the AIM Center is the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials for Learning. We are based at CAST, and CAST is the nonprofit that founded, pioneered, and continues to do research and development on the Universal Design for Learning framework. The role of the AIM Center is that we are really focused on making sure that materials and technologies that are used for teaching and learning, as well as in workforce, in any setting where there is education or workforce development happening, that those materials and technologies are accessible for individuals with disabilities. So we're funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs to do this work. Our technical assistance is offered at no cost in the United States, and we welcome you to follow up with us with additional questions. We provide multiple tiers of technical assistance, so if you have questions beyond today, we welcome hearing from you. Today's webinar is specifically focused on what's available in Microsoft's tools. We're hoping, our goal is come fall to continue this series, which we've called Features in Accessibility. We've started to line up additional vendors. We have invited our first to be Microsoft. We've developed a friendship with one of our panelists today, Mike Tolfson. And we, as you, I know many of you are probably here because every time you see a presentation by Mike, you learn something new. Microsoft has built in a lot of inclusivity into their products, as have a lot of other vendors that are out there that the AIM Center has built relationships and partnerships with. So we're hoping to extend this as a series where other vendors come on to an AIM Center webinar and share not only what the accessibility features are that they've built into their tools, but also what is their philosophy? Why is accessibility important to their business model as well? So we're leading this series off with Microsoft. And in addition to Mike, we also have Alice Wright, who is a teacher who uses Microsoft tools in practice. So Mike was going to be speaking to the tool side, and Alice will be following up with what she experiences in the classroom with her students. So I'll give them a few minutes here to introduce themselves. Let's start with Mike.
Hey folks, my name is Mike Phelpson. I work as a product manager on the Microsoft education team, and I work a lot with what we call the inclusive classroom, which you'll learn a lot more about today.
Thanks, Mike. And Alice.
I forgot I had my mic muted. Hi, my name is Alice Wright. I work for Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland, and I am a special education teacher as well as an AT specialist. So I work with the whole county in making sure our students have access to the materials they need to learn every day in the classroom.
Great, thanks, Alice. And I'm Cynthia Curry. I'm the director of the AIM Center, as I said at the opening of today's webinar, and it's really my pleasure to be the moderator and to be able to facilitate the conversation that Mike and Alice are going to be having. So as a reminder, please be using the chat to speak to other attendees who are here. If you have a question for Mike or Alice, please drop those in the Q&A. Today's objectives are that participants will learn about the latest features in Microsoft's tools, and Mike and Alice have broken these up into 3 areas: reading, writing, and math. So there'll be some demonstration, there'll be some discussion, and there'll be some examples provided that will follow each, and that will be the instructional practices that leverage each of the features. So before we get started, thought it would be helpful to get a little bit of background about who's here. So 2 questions that are in a sequence of polls. So the first question is a yes or no question, and it's, I use Microsoft tools with my students. If you're a teacher, we know there are a lot of parents who started to do instruction from home with their children. So there's a question here for parents and guardians as well. So whether you're a teacher or a parent or guardian, are you using Microsoft tools with your students or with your children? And I'm going to go ahead. Let me relaunch. Let's see. Did everybody have a chance to answer that question? I think when I ended the poll, I wanted to just be able to start displaying it. But this gives us an idea. About 3/4 of the attendees have used or are using Microsoft tools with their students and or children, but 25% no. There we go. And then the second question is, if you are in that 75% category, are your students or your children using the inclusive features of Microsoft's tools? So there's yes, they are, no, and you may not be sure. And we're hoping that by the end of the demonstrations today that you'll know what those inclusive features are. Maybe they're being used and they're so integrated with what students or your children are doing that you don't even know that they're inclusive features. They're just there. They're just built in. And in some cases, this will be an opportunity to discover those inclusive features that that your students and children may not be using, as well as ourselves using. Let me share these results. So about 24% of students and children are using the inclusive features, and about 61% don't know. So this is definitely teachable moment. So thanks everybody for taking the time to participate in our poll. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to hand this over to Mike and Alice.
Great, thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
And welcome everyone. I'm just gonna share my screen here. And hopefully, Cynthia, maybe just give me a confirmation that you can see that.
I can see that, looks great.
Great, thank you. Well, as Cynthia mentioned, Alice and I are gonna be talking today about inclusive classrooms, and we're gonna be focusing a lot on reading, writing, and math. And in terms of just, if you want to reach out to Alice and I, there's some information up here, emails. If you're on Twitter, I'm on Twitter, and YouTube. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these things moving forwards. But to start out, the way that Microsoft thinks about inclusive classrooms is really built into our company mission statement. Our mission statement is to empower every person on the planet to achieve more. And our education mission statement is to empower every student on the planet to achieve more. And I always say that mission means it's not about empowering 86% of the students. It's not about empowering 94.3% of them. It's about empowering 100% of all students. So it is an inclusive mission statement. And at a very high level, the way we think about this is we want to enable all students to grow their potential and gain independence. And in addition, we want to make sure that educators can empower and reach every learner. And especially with remote learning, this gets even harder. And so how can we, through technology, maybe enable that teacher to reach every student, even if the student is not in class? And at a systems level, how can we enable schools to meet their goals around equity, inclusion, and really ensure that every student is brought forward? And that's where we believe our platforms can help with that, because every district that I've spoken to, and it's a lot of them, they typically will have goals of equity and inclusion in their strategic vision. And so we believe we can help with that at the Microsoft platform. Now, this is the broad way that Microsoft thinks about accessibility at scale. And there are 6 categories here. So our whole company, this is not just education, this is enterprise, public sector, everywhere. And you can see the breadth that our company covers. Now, I'm not going to be covering all these today, and Alice won't be either. We'll be focusing a bit more on the learning, maybe a little bit on neurodiversity as well. But probably the number one thing I hear from educators and school leaders when I talk about Microsoft's inclusive platform is, oh my gosh, Mike, I had no idea that we had access to all these things already. These are already built into the free Office apps you have. They're already built into Windows if you're a Windows user. So all these things are documented in great detail at this link here, which is part of this deck. But as I like to say, built in, mainstream, non-stigmatizing, and free. And so this is something to just keep in mind. What we'll be talking a bit about today is what I like to call the inclusive classroom. And the story I like to tell is that I talk to a lot of school districts and a lot of educators. And historically, when I might present, if I start talking and using the words pure accessibility, for a lot of people, that word accessibility would trigger this reaction. And they would say something along the lines of this. They'd say, oh, accessibility, go talk to Frank. He's in the basement. He handles all of our screen readers and all that accessibility stuff. We're going to be over here in this other place talking about education. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think inclusive design and the inclusive classroom is how I like to talk about it, because we're talking about reading, writing, math, and communication. And those are things that everyone needs to care about. Yes, maybe the tools that we have will help someone with dyslexia more so than a mainstream reader, but they're going to help all people with reading. Or our tools will help all people with math, and they might help someone extra who needs a little extra assistance, but it's not like those people are down in the basement and focusing on these really specialized technologies that only those people care about. And then actually, I'm curious, Alice, just to ask you a quick question to share.
Sure.
What's been your experience in sort of that dichotomy of accessibility versus inclusive tools and working with all of your students? What have you seen?
So one of the things that we always do when I go out is talk about universal design for learning. So the idea that all these tools are available for all our students, and some students may need it more than others. And a lot of times our teachers understand that in principle, but because they haven't thought about their lesson from that universal place sometimes, they're not necessarily implementing in that way. And that's how we look at it, is trying to educate our teachers that if you design with the student with the most needs in mind, you're going to meet the needs for all your students in the classroom. And that's where these products come in really well.
Great. Couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly how Microsoft thinks about it when we design our products as well. And so hopefully some of that will come through today. The other thing, I put a couple of these links up front in the beginning because I know sometimes the webinars you might have to leave early, or you're like, oh, what were those slides? I wanted to get those. So I put this up front so people, if you need to take a picture, copy the link, screenshot, this will be provided afterwards, but make sure you capture it. And the other thing is I put these interactive guides up front because everything that I'll be showing and that Alice will be talking about, if you're sitting there, and you probably will at some point, you'll say, oh, Mike went through too fast in that demo. He clicked on some button. I couldn't tell what he clicked on. I'll never remember that. Don't worry. Everything's captured in these free interactive guides. They're based on the web. So everything that we'll be showing today, you can get a free interactive guide to share with others, to share with yourself, to share with parents, share with students. So this is all captured in nice interactive guides. So don't worry if you missed something. And the other thing is I recently created a YouTube channel, and it's kind of funny because I would have told you, 6 months ago, I would never be a YouTuber, but guess what? I'm a YouTuber now. And I've made really short and sweet little videos, 2-minute videos, how-to clips on how to use many of these inclusive technologies, reading, writing, math. So if you're looking to, again, share these with other teachers, share them with yourself, there's a YouTube channel that has a lot of these little quick tip videos. So I put those up front so you don't have to worry about missing that later. So we're going to start out with reading. And that's a sort of a core foundational skill. And what we have is I'm going to be showing something that's called the immersive reader here. And what is the immersive reader? Well, a few years ago, and I was actually part of this little team, we said, what if we took the latest science and research around reading? Because there's a lot of science and research around reading out there, it turns out. And what if we took that and we focused inclusively on dyslexia? And we said, we hypothesize if we build these tools into our mainstream products, they will not only help students with dyslexia, sort of like Alice was talking about, they will help all students with reading. And it might be non-native speakers, could be mainstream readers, it could be someone who is an early reader, someone with vision impairments, students with dyslexia, all sorts of people with reading. And so that is something that we've built into our mainstream products. And I'm going to switch over and just show what is that immersive reader. Now, what does it look like? Where do I find it? So I'm here now, and I'm in the free version of Microsoft Word. It's in the web. And I have to say free a lot because a lot of times people who aren't as familiar with Microsoft have that 2011 era view of Microsoft, which is it only works on Windows and it costs a lot of money. Well, that is the 2011 version. We are in the year 2020 now. So this is free. It's Office on the web. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, Outlook are all free and in the web. They work on Mac, they work on Chromebooks, they work on iPads, and yes, they work on Windows too. So
and Android devices.
Oh, and Android devices as well. Yeah, thank you. So here I am in the free version of Word. And here's the Home tab. But if I switch over to the View menu in Word, there's this button called the Immersive Reader. And I'm going to click this, and I'll walk through what you're going to see. So first off, you can see that we reduce distraction on the page, and we call this focus mode, help reduce distractions. Down at the bottom, there's a little play button. And when I click play, Zoom jumped right in front of my play button. Try that again.
The study of Earth's landforms is called physical geography. Landforms can be mountains and valleys.
So we have read aloud with word and line highlighting. Now that is not revolutionary, but that is now part of Word, which is free. So built in, mainstream, non-stigmatizing, and free. I can change the speed of the voice. I can read it faster or slower. I can choose a male or a female voice. I can go to the upper right here and click on text preferences, and I can change the way the page looks. So for example, we know from research there's something called visual crowding that some people experience. And to reduce visual crowding, if you increase the spacing, and I'm going to click this, I increase the line, letter, and word spacing, and that can reduce visual crowding. And for some people, that can help with reading speeds and focus and comprehension. I can choose a couple of different fonts. I've chosen Comic Sans, which is actually designed for younger readers, and that some younger readers prefer the Comic Sans font. I can change the background color very easily. So many people have challenges reading with white or black backgrounds. This it can be in terms of the eyes and strain. So these are tuned for accessibility, and I can overlay different colors really easily. And if I want to make the text much bigger in the upper right, I can scroll this little wheel here, and you can see now maybe I have visual impairments, maybe I'm wanting to see short lines for dyslexia. Maybe that I'm an English language learner, I just want to practice a few larger words. So I can customize that very easily. Now, the next set of things is where it starts to get even more interesting. I'm going to click on this. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to click on grammar options right here. And what you can see is I can break the words into syllables. So if I click on syllables, you can see all these words are broken into syllables with a single click. So think about syllables and those teachers that are clapping the syllables out loud, maybe the Orton-Gillingham method with dyslexia, or just anyone practicing new words. I can highlight different parts of speech on the page. So for example, I can highlight the nouns or the verbs, the adjectives, even the adverbs. And I can customize those. So maybe I only want to turn on a couple of those. Maybe I want to have my verbs in blue. I can do that. Maybe I can't make out any colors, and I want to just be able to show labels. So I have a visual distinguishing mark above the different part of speech. So very customizable, as you can see, and I can choose one or some or none of these at the same time. And then the last set of things I'll show around reading preferences. So if you know what a reading ruler is, where you maybe cut a little piece of paper and you overlay and so it just shows one or two lines through the text. If I click on line focus here, I get a reading ruler. And I can hit the play button still.
Valleys. They can also be glaciers or rivers.
And it scrolls it automatically. I can choose the little scroll up and down on the right-hand side to move that myself. And I can choose 3 lines or 5 lines. Again, very customizable for my reading ruler. Now, the last couple of things, one is a picture dictionary. So I can click on a word and get a picture.
Earths. Earths.
And this is, we actually licensed BoardMaker. For those of you familiar with Toby BoardMaker images, very popular, especially in special education.
Mountains. Mountains.
I can click on a picture and get a word.
Valleys.
And maybe one of the most powerful things is I can also translate. So thinking about my non-native speakers, think about students with disabilities who are also non-native speakers, which can be extra challenging. I can translate in over 67 languages. So I'm going to scroll down here. I've got many to choose from. Maybe I'm going to choose Spanish down here, and I have it on by word. So now I click on a word, and I can hear
Mountains.
it in English.
Montañas.
And it switches that in real time.
Rivers. Ríos.
If I want to translate the entire document, I go back and I choose Translate Document. Now when I read out loud,
El estudio de las formas terrestres de la Tierra se llama geografía física.
and if I want to slow that down, I can do that easily and hit play.
Física. Las formas de tierra pueden ser montañas y valles.
So really powerful, and I can translate in so many different languages. And if I want to go back to original, I click on original or Spanish, and you can see the syllables are still broken down in Spanish. And if I want to highlight parts of speech in Spanish, I could still do that as well. So all of the things you just saw are built into that immersive reader. And this is not just available in Word. It's available in OneNote. It's available in Microsoft Teams, Flipgrid, Microsoft Forms. It's also available in the Edge browser. So the Edge browser is the free browser that Microsoft makes available, and it's based on Chrome. So if you use Google Chrome, we actually use the Google Chrome and we wrap that in the Edge browser. So all of your shortcuts, all of your extensions work in the free Edge browser. But what's nice on Edge is I can select text here in Edge, right-click and say, open an immersive reader on any web page. Now look at this, I can do all those same things. Maybe I wanna have a blue background, and I wanna break words into syllables, highlight verbs, maybe do line focus. We're even bringing translate to this very soon, and I can do read aloud.
Microsoft is assembling educators, partners, and students to host Global Learning Week.
So that was all on a web page. Wikipedia, blogs, whatever, just select text and open an immersive reader. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip back to the presentation. And actually, Alice, what I'm going to do before I talk any more about immersive reader, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk and maybe show a little bit about how you've experienced immersive reader with your students.
So one of the things that I really like about the immersive reader is that I'm able to use it on any device. In our district, our students are on iPads, Android devices, Chromebooks, and Windows PCs, depending on what the student's need is and the school. So with our students, especially now during distance learning and us rolling out our learning materials on Canvas and the immersive reader coming to Canvas, that was really helpful, especially for our elementary school and our students and our parents who are learning how to teach our students at home and getting all of that. And the first set of links that you showed us, not your YouTube channel, that I didn't know about, but the links where it showed how to use the tools, those are what I ended up sending out to a couple of my parents for them to understand how to use this tool at home with their student to help them be able to read what they need to read. And also a lot of our materials that we buy for math is my area of expertise, are put out in Word documents. And so they're able to a lot of our students can do the math, but have difficulty with reading. And so when the worksheet is in Word, they're able to go ahead and use that immersive reader to read what they're supposed to do, and then they can go ahead and type in their answers and turn it in however the teacher was expecting them to turn it in. So this has been a very versatile tool for both our special ed students, our students who I would say are on the spectrum of executive functioning needs that sometimes needed to help them focus to get their work done, as well as our ELL students who needed to be able to listen to the text. A lot of our students just tire of reading in English, and they just want to hear it in their native language so that they know what they need to do. And this has been an excellent tool to kind of support our students across the board. And that's really how we've been using Immersive Reader right now, especially on our Canvas pages, because that's how our instruction was done for the last, how many months? 3 months before school closed. School closed just last week. So that's how our students were able to get access to a lot of the materials for reading. So this is a game changer, just like you have on the screen, for our teachers as well as our students in the classroom or their home classroom.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's great to hear. We've actually put together a lot of materials just for parents. So like you said, so parents can make sure they understand how these things work.
And I do want to point out that the immersive reader, as long as you put in the alt text for images, it will read all of that as well on the page for the students, as well as the math equations, especially when you write the worksheet in Word. It reads them pretty clearly for our secondary students as well.
No, exactly. And actually, when we get to the math part, I'll actually show that as well, about the math and reading the math out loud. Actually, to your point, Alice, one other thing that I'll show here briefly, because I think it is really powerful, to your point about reading alt text or just reading text from images, right here is, I've taken a picture of a Harry Potter book and I've booted OneNote. OneNote is also our free app that's available on all platforms. And when I put a picture I've sent a picture from Office Lens, which is a free app I'll show a little bit later, take a picture with Office Lens in my phone and send that into OneNote like here. And we automatically run optical character recognition. So in OneNote, I hit this view menu, just like I did in Word, and there's the same button, Immersive Reader. And on the Harry Potter page, what I can do now is get that full Immersive Reader and read out loud.
His progress, its head revolving on its long neck.
And all those same things, syllables, parts of speech, change the background color. I can even translate, I'll translate Harry Potter, into French, and we'll read French Harry Potter out loud.
And one of the tools I usually show my students who have attentional needs is the line focus.
Oh yes, the line focus, definitely.
Yeah. And it's a
Sorry.
It's a universal feature on our state assessments. So just showing every student how to use the line focus to help them read through, even though they may be able to read on their own, is just a helpful tool for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like finger reading, but the line does it for you. So you can do anything with that picture that you could with the Immersive Reader, including translation. So really interesting universal content access. And you can see we have older students who are using the Immersive Reader. We have early readers who are 5 and 6 years old, a student practicing sight words. And this is a great quote in terms of the impact. An educator sent me this late last year. I love this quote.
One of my best statements from a student, it was an ELL student who said to me that at the end of the school day, I'm just tired and I like to listen to the text instead. And sometimes we forget about how strenuous it is for them to like constantly read in English, which is their second language at this point. And by the time they go through, was a secondary student, by the time they get to the 6th and 7th period of the day, they really are exhausted. And this is a way for them to keep on going, is that they can listen to their text, get what they need to do to be able to do their work. And that was a powerful thing that I always remember for him, because you don't think about that all the time.
Yeah, that's a great story. I've heard the exact same story of a woman I know whose son is in 7th grade, severely dyslexic, and the same thing. By the time school's done at the end of the day, she says he's exhausted and he just wants to be able to hear it read out loud when he gets home. So it's very similar to where if he's been reading all day, that can just kind of be a little bit of a help on just relaxing when he gets home. So this is another one that's really powerful. And what's great is this, if I was to give anyone an assignment for today's webinar, it is if you've never downloaded the Office Lens, right here, Office Lens app for either iOS or Android, download it on your phone or tablet today and try this out because it's pretty incredible. So it's free and allows you to take a picture of anything, and it works on iPads, iPhones, Android phones, and Android tablets. And right here, I'll take a picture of a book. And Office Lens will say, where do you want to send that? And I'll choose Immersive Reader right here. And immediately it runs OCR, and I can read it out loud, that book.
Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout. Would not take the garbage out.
And I can do all those same things. Spacing, I can change the background color, make the text bigger, highlight the nouns and syllables. And I can even go and translate that picture of a book I just took into a different language. I can turn on the picture dictionary to get a picture for ham, for example, and then just do a read aloud in Spanish.
Jamones. Y aunque su papá gritaba y gritaba, ella simplemente nos sacaba la basura.
So that is Office Lens, and it's free on iPhone or Android, and really powerful universal content access. Any iPad works, any Android tablet works. And then
so
also
for secondary students, just to comment on the Office Lens, that's what I have them use when we have teachers who are more paper-based and they forget to give them their work digitally because they need a they need a text reader, and so they just take a picture to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And similarly for remote learning, this is Microsoft Forms. So if you're doing assessments, informative assessments, then a lot of times if a student needs read aloud help or maybe translator, this is all built in. So any question, any comprehension, anything can be fully accessed by just hovering on anything in the Microsoft Forms. So this is really powerful for in-class, but even more powerful for remote learning from what we've seen. And then the last thing I'll show here are, as actually Alice mentioned, the Immersive Reader is now available in many other apps outside of Microsoft programs. So this is now available in Canvas. Here we go. There's a picture of Canvas and that Immersive Reader. It's in beta right now for Canvas. So your administrator would have to enable this until they fully ship it, but it is available in Canvas and all these other apps. So Wonderopolis, Wakelet, Nearpod, Pear Deck, ThingLink, Buncee. So we've made this available, and more apps are starting to integrate the Immersive Reader into what they do. There's also Dyslexia Awareness course that Microsoft partnered together with the Made by Dyslexia nonprofit. So this is not only good for educators who might not have expertise or background with dyslexia, this is great for parents. And we've had over 150,000 people go through this free online course. Each one is only an hour, so it's not a giant time commitment. But with dyslexia, which can impact up to 15% of the population, really powerful just to let people understand what is dyslexia, strengths, challenges, educators working with dyslexia. So this is great to share with folks. And then there's some PD we've put together that has a deeper dive, the research on Immersive Reader, deeper dive demos, all the apps and platforms that it can be found in. And with that, maybe Alice and I both, I'll take a look in the Q&A just to make sure there's not any pressing questions. But before we move on to writing, were there any questions? I'm just going to stop sharing briefly. I'll just look into the Q&A, and Alice, if you have any comments before we move on to the next section, which is writing.
So,
Yeah, Mike, there are just a couple of questions, and they're technical. From Jane, she says, I find Immersive Reader in Canvas is only available in certain areas. Are there plans to have it included in all areas?
Good question. So I can't speak. Canvas will decide if they want to make it more broadly available or not. I would say we hope they do. They currently are experimenting with it on the Canvas pages. And we hope that once we have Immersive Reader available broadly, which it's still in public preview now, that Canvas will decide to make it even more broadly available. But I can't speak to if they're going to do that or not yet. But I hope so too.
Then the other
I
question.
hope so as well.
The other question is also technical, and it relates back to a demonstration. So can't go back and redo the demonstration, but maybe you can speak to it. Trudy asks, how did you get Immersive Reader as an option for opening into?
Oh, in the Edge browser. So if you have the latest version of the Edge browser, which is free, if you go to microsoft.com/edge, download the brand new Edge browser, and the latest version has the ability to select any text, right click, and say open an Immersive Reader. So if you have an old version, you won't see that, but the new versions you will.
Great, and that's it from the Q&A.
Okay, great. We
Great.
will move on to writing. So writing efficiently with dictation, editor, and word prediction. So this is a quote from a school for dyslexia we did a study with in the UK and Britain. And it says, all our pupils without exception hate writing. The learning tools transformed writing for our pupils. So we had students that were working with a mix of dictation and the Immersive Reader together, so they could dictate, then listen back, and cycle. This was an 11-year-old girl, dyslexia and dysgraphia, sort of before using our tools, and independently on her own, she produced this on OneNote using a mix of dictation as well as read aloud. This is a 7th grade boy, severely dyslexic and dysgraphic, and you can see the writing on the left was him trying to write the story, and then using dictation or speech to text, this is what he produced in Word. And so again, our goal is that sort of built-in, mainstream, non-stigmatizing, and free. So what I'm going to do now is go back, and here is my Word document. I'm going to hit enter a couple times. If you go on the Home tab, and this is not only in Word, it is in Word, OneNote, Outlook, PowerPoint. They all have built-in dictate on the Home tab, and you might not have noticed it, but speech to text is now built in everywhere and free in Office 365. So if I hit the dictate button, now I will be dictating in Microsoft Word, period. Isn't it great when I can use my voice and make an exclamation point? Exclamation point. So you can see here, you've got the ability, I'll turn that off. High grade speech to text is built in, and we support over 20 languages, and it's in Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, OneNote. So speech to text is really coming everywhere. The other thing that's really nice that we've built in more recently, I'm going to switch to a document here, is next generation spell check. We call this editor. And if I go to the Home tab, or if you go to the Review tab, you'll see this where it used to be a spell checker, there's now editor. And I can now get all sorts of new types of feedback on my document. You can see it's calculating my editor score. So not only do I have spelling, which is, this has been around a while, spell check, and I can step through. I've also got grammar, but I have new things like formality. Instead of go bananas, maybe I should say go wild. Vocabulary, think outside the box, maybe you should say think freely. Inclusive language, stewardesses, that's probably 40 years too late to be using that one. Flight attendants, clarity and conciseness, and sensitive geopolitical references. So there's lots of these brand new capabilities. And this, again, this isn't just for students for accessibility needs and dysgraphia and dyslexia. This is for everyone. So editor is really powerful, and you can change some of the things that it looks for. So if you go to editor settings, there's lots of these brand new settings that are appearing now. And so this is really powerful. It's not only in the web, it's in the desktop version of Word. So in Word desktop, there's an editor button. You just might not have noticed it if you go to the review tab. So this is one example where we're bringing this out in a much more broad area. The other thing I'm going to show is lightweight word prediction, which is now, again, part of Windows 10. So I'm in Windows 10 and I opened settings. And don't worry on this because this is all in those free guides that I talked about. So if you say, Mike, you went too fast, I'll never remember that. Don't worry, it's in those guides. If I go down to show text suggestions as I type, now I'm just going to open up, let's see a little a notepad here, and see how I type the letters P-R-O and it gives me word prediction, just like on your phone, the little highlighting those words. And if I want to launch a new Word document, let's say I open up Word Desktop, similarly, this works anywhere in Windows. So I'm going to click a new Word document here, and I type just like this, and I get word prediction. So this is supported in over 75 languages. Now, this is not high-grade word prediction. So for example, this is not like Don Johnston word prediction. But if you want something that's lightweight and built-in and free and part of Windows, this can be an option because any student can turn this on through settings. So those are three really simple things, but powerful things that are fully built in and available, right? We've got editor, dictation, and word prediction or text suggestions. And again, here's a quote from an educator that's been using this, but I'm going to turn over to Alice, who's going to talk a little bit about how she's been using these tools, and I think she's going to show some examples too. So Alice, I will let you take it away. I'll stop sharing now as well.
Okay, great. So I am actually a person who's a poor speller, so I may not need a high grade word predictor, but I do need something to help me with my spelling every so often when I have to write. And so I like the predictor that's on the tool. There we go. But let me first make my screen bigger. Okay. And so for a lot of things that I do for students is we go out and I work with a student who may be struggling with getting their writing out. So this is a work sample from a 9th grade student. And we struggled to come up with a topic for them to talk about, but he was really passionate about talking about why he hated school. So I let him go with that. And he wrote this out. And I don't know how well you can see it, but it took him about 20 minutes to write that. And not a single punctuation is in there, and his letters are up and down. And he has some uppercase, some lowercase, but there's no structure to his writing at all, you know? And so I was like, I asked him, well, how does he feel about handwriting? He said it's really hard for him. So it's not that his handwriting is illegible. Like, I can read this. I'm pretty sure most people can, but he spends so much energy trying to do this handwriting that he can't really get his thoughts out. So I always try 2 different things with students to try to see which one would work best. And I tried word prediction, and that really didn't work very well for him because he's not a very good typer yet. Even though he's in 9th grade, I was very surprised at that too. But when we went with dictate, he was able to get all his thoughts out, and all I had to do was, all I had to do was, sorry, people talking to me. Sorry. So all I had to do was teach him how to say period. So even though he didn't know his punctuation very well, while I was teaching him how to use speech to text, all I said to him was, when you come to a pause in your thought, just say period, and then we'll come back and look at editing. And this is what he put together. And we went back and we used the editor to go back and edit his work, and he was able to produce a beautiful piece that he was proud of. Like, he was very happy at the end of the day with what he wrote, and also talking about how he got in trouble for not doing his work all the time with his parents, which was the object of what he wanted to talk to me about. That was the only thing he was really upset about when he came to school. But at the end of the day, I started working with him on this, I think in right about the time of the shutdown. So I actually worked with him in person, but I still worked with him in distance learning. And by the time the school closed around May, he was able to do his work, and his teachers were very pleased with his writing because he was able to use his voice to be able to get his thoughts out. And he was able to think about the fact that he needs to use grammar tools, which is something that is really important in the secondary level. And we expect our students to already know how to do it. But some of our students who have struggled with writing all the way through have not really learned how to do that. They know how to do the free-flowing thought, but haven't thought about how to structure their writing to make it clear. So this is just one example that I was able to find because I worked with a student throughout distance learning of how this tool can support a student do their writing. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right now because that's the example I wanted to show for writing, and I have a different example I want to show for math, but I want to turn it back over to Mike so we can talk a little bit more about math, I think, right now.
Yes, let's get to math, because
That's my passionate subject. I was a poor writer, so I do understand my students.
well, and the thing that, you know, Alice, you probably know this as well, math doesn't get a lot of play in the world of accessibility typically, so we like to give it a little bit of love.
Yes, I do. I have to get people to kind of think about it all the time.
So inclusive math, what does that mean? So there could be challenges for students, whether it's dyslexia, ADHD, dyscalculia, might be mobility impairments. And again, back to that, how can we give students independence, especially during distance learning? I think it gets even more important because mom and dad may or may not be able to give help with math. And if there's not teachers maybe in the ability to communicate with teachers as often, then having independence and having the software help you out where it can, I think becomes pretty important. So I'm gonna switch to the demo again, and we're back in one of my favorite tools, which is OneNote. And these math tools you're gonna see, they currently work in the web version of OneNote, which is free, and they also work in the Windows 10 version of OneNote, which is free. They're not quite in iPad, but they're coming in the next couple of months, they're coming to iPad as well, so stay tuned on that. So I'm in OneNote. Now what I'm gonna show doesn't need to be, we call this right here inked math, drawn math. You don't need a stylus. This works just with a written equation like this as well. And OneNote supports lots of types of equations. You can build equations. But I'm gonna show, just for fun, I'm gonna show it with digital inking, but it works with typed math as well. So I've got an equation that's selected here. I go to the insert menu in OneNote and I'm gonna choose math. So first off, you can see we convert that equation right here into math. And I'm gonna select an action. And first I'll say graph both sides in 2D. And it makes a graph immediately. I can insert that on the page, and I can scroll it, do those types of things, and I can explore that graph as well. But I can also say solve for X. So in this case, it helps me solve the equation. Now let's say I want to understand how the steps work. I can say show steps for completing the square. And immediately you can see it works out all the details step by step so I can really understand how did that equation get solved. Now the part that Alice mentioned that she likes, and I do too, now let's say I experience visual crowding, or maybe I want to hear that math read out loud, or maybe I don't speak the native language as well and I want to hear it in a different language. There is an immersive reader button right here, open an immersive reader. And when I click that, what you're going to see is that full equation is put right into the web. And then I can read that out loud, and I can do all the things that we talked about. You know, maybe I want to do line focus to give me some extra focus here. I can do that. I can do the read aloud. Now I can do all those different things right there on this same equation. So the full immersive reader supports everything right here for math. So really powerful in terms of that ability to do all those math pieces. Now, the other thing that we have is the ability to select an equation and generate an independent math practice. So I'm gonna go back to the same equation, hit the insert and hit math. And this time in selecting an action, I'll still solve for X, but there's also this generate a practice quiz. So imagine I'm studying for a quiz at home and I want more practice, and I don't have anywhere to generate me a practice quiz. Well, now we do. So it says, how many questions would you like to generate? And I'll choose generate 3 questions. So what it's going to do now is going to go out and using Microsoft Forms technology along with AI, it's generating an entire Microsoft form and embedding it onto my OneNote page. And look at this, there are 3 new questions that are similar but different to 5x squared plus 3x minus 7. So I've generated my own practice now. I'm just going to guess a couple of answers here on these 3 questions and hit submit. And because I'm a student and this is my own form, I can view my own results. So now I guessed them all wrong, but it shows me which ones were right. And now I can go back and work with the solver. So I've generated my own practice quiz independently at home. And again, if I needed to do translation with the immersive reader, I can do all those things that we talked about with the immersive reader, translate the story problem to a different language, read it out loud, have math equations read out loud. So everything right there you just saw is free, and it's also available right now. And we're going to have, Alice is going to talk a little bit about exactly how she's been doing this and talk about some examples that she's been using as well. And everything you saw is free in that demo. So if you missed something, it's all in that interactive demo guide. It looks like someone pasted it into the chat window as well. So don't worry if you missed the buttons I was clicking, they're all available.
So this is a Word worksheet that we've done, which you could use the immersive reader to read there. But what I usually end up doing is putting this worksheet into OneNote. And especially when I have things that the student has to interact with. So this I designed for a student who had some physical needs. And so therefore they couldn't type, but they could use their finger on the screen. So they had a touchscreen device, and they can use OneNote to be able to use the draw feature within OneNote and be able to go in and put in, they were going to plot points and then do reflective points. But they went in and they were able to plot their points on it. And one of the features that I like about OneNote that works really well for math is that this coordinate plane that I put there, the grid that I put there, I can actually make it so that it's an image on the page that's set in the background. So the student can't move it around, but they're able to manipulate and do all the tasks that I'm asking them to do. So they can use it. This particular student was on a computer, but they were able to go ahead and use it. They could do all they were in geometry and algebra at the same time. Different issue, but they were able to do all their geometry drawings that they needed to do on a OneNote. They were able to save it in one place. So they just had a OneNote that was their math binder, and I'll say binder in quotes. So they were able to have all their work there because they also had some executive functioning needs, and it gave them some structure in terms of making sure they knew what their classwork was, what their homework was that they needed to get done, and one place for the teachers to go look at all their work so they didn't have to like send things in and turn things in. Everything was done all in one place, which is one of the reasons why I like OneNote. For students who have some needs in terms of organization, they could take pictures of their worksheet. This particular teacher had a station, so they didn't have to hold it. But they could take a picture of a worksheet if the teacher forgot and put it into OneNote for the student to be able to use and complete their work. And so for math, it has the equation editor and the graphing tool that you're able to do. But for students who really also need to just handwrite their work as well, just like any other student is handwriting on paper, they can do the very same thing using OneNote because they have the drawing tools and they have everything else there that can help them do that on screen if handwriting and using their hands are a difficulty for that student due to some kind of physical disability. And so I just wanted to show some of the options. You could do some of the same things with Word, but what you lack with Word is the organizational structure, because each one of these things would be separate files. While with OneNote, everything is in one binder, as I like to call it for the students, and they don't have to go around trying to find things and see what they need to do to go study back with it. And so it just kind of creates that organizational structure that helps students learn math. which sometimes is the reason why they don't do well in math as well, is their lack of organization of their materials. So I just wanted to show some examples of how you can use some of these tools that can help for a variety of needs that your student may have. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see whether Mike has anything to add.
Yeah, no, I think those are some great examples that you just showed. It's funny because with remote learning, my own daughter was using OneNote and math quite a bit in her daily work. So I got to see her at the kitchen table, you know, going through all these capabilities, which is kind of fun. So we're going to be wrapping up here, and maybe we'll have a little bit of Q&A to answer as well. But I think this sums up, this is a quote from Marley Matlin: no one should have to ask for access. It should just be there. That's back to the built-in, mainstream, non-stigmatizing, and free. And there's also some things we didn't cover today around communication, real-time captions, translation, PowerPoint Live. Maybe we'll come back and do that a different time. But all 4 of those guides are available. I'm going to pull that up again too, just to wrap up at the end. Copy of today's presentation, which has some more slides that we didn't show, but they're all part of the overall deck, are available at this link right here. And in addition, these 4 interactive guides, again, cover everything that we talked about and more today. They're free, interactive click-throughs. Share them with parents. Check them out for PD over the summer. Share them with other educators. In addition, this YouTube channel that I put together has pretty much everything we saw today as well, but broken up into nice little 2-minute consumable quick tip videos. So a lot of good stuff there, again, to share, watch the videos. And other than that, I think happy to answer questions. I'll put it back on this final screen here. Happy to answer questions that might be available or still top of mind for people. Alice, did you have any closing statements or points you want to talk about?
So I really just want to emphasize how unique it is that all the tools work together and you have all the same features in each of the tools. So as a teacher, if you develop a PowerPoint, the student is still going to be able to use Immersive Reader to be able to read their work that way. The same tool to read in PowerPoint, in Microsoft Word, in OneNote. So even if you're using a lot of different tools, the tool they're using to read is the same. And so that familiarity is what's really going to help the student know what they need to do and have it become second nature for them, especially for our students who struggle. We don't want the tool to be something that they're struggling with too. So once they learn it, then they're able to just focus their attention on the content we're trying to teach them. And so that's kind of how I want to end with my last thought.
Love it.
And it works across all content areas, including math. Have to plug that one more time.
You know, we've learned to love math at the Ames Center as well. I'm a former science teacher many, many years ago. And so, you know, as a former science, technology, engineering, math person working with students, thank you, Microsoft. I know John Brandt had asked a question, and I think, I'm not sure if everybody could see it. He did ask about whether the technology works with MathML, and the answer was yes. And so I know others who are in the MathML world might want to know that as well. So thank you very much. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Mike. This was such a great interactive conversation about the technical aspects, the philosophical, how this works in practice. And I also wanted to really emphasize how important it is that these features that are built into Microsoft's tools not be reserved just for students with disabilities or students who've been identified as needing them in order to make progress, to be independent, to participate, but all students, to give everybody, options. And that was one of the main purposes of today, is if you're working at home with your students, anticipating that your students will be working remotely come fall and into the future, that these tools are available to them when there are not the human beings beside them in the school buildings. And so to build, take this opportunity to build independence and participation when students are outside of the school building. And of course, when they're there as well, everybody needing access to these tools. So thank you both very much. I think all of the questions were answered.
Yeah.
Looks
Thank you.
like the Q&A pod is empty. So thank you to Luis for being in the chat and the Q&A, Leslie for being in the chat, moderating, to Anne, our captioner today, and again, especially to Mike and Alice for sharing your expertise and lots of different tools and applications for our attendees today. There's a survey that we'd love to gather your feedback, and I believe that Leslie dropped that link in the chat. Your feedback will be very helpful as we continue to plan out these webinars into the future, which will not be until the fall. And so everybody have a productive summer of professional development. The AIM Center will be taking a break from webinars and planning a new series come fall. So thank you very much for participating today, Mike and Alice. Love to have you
Thank
back to
you.
continue this conversation as well.
Yeah. Thank you.